evening, Buffalo Late Night. I am Thomas DeLoss, your host, and you can find me at the Thomas DeLoss. Uh, First, I want to step out and say I apologize for the hiatus from last week's show. I I felt as though with the current events in Buffalo that I kind of wanted to step aside and allow for some other voices to step forward. And again, I know I can speak for Joe and for Greg. Sincerest condolences to everybody involved, families, victims. I know it's been a tragic time. But let me start off by saying I want to introduce everybody's here tonight. We have one straggler who will be here hopefully momentarily. But to start off, we've got Joe Miller, who is the voice of the Overreaction podcast and a Buffalo Rumblings contributor. And then also, for the first time, we've got Greg Thompson, who is the host of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite.
So last week, or 2 weeks ago, mind you, we did a show. It was a hot button topic concerning an email that was spread around about the new stadium financing and pricing. Got into some pretty in-depth information. You can see the recording both on YouTube as well on Twitch and Twitter. If you have any commentary tonight, by the way, and you feel like, voicing your interest on the 53-man, you can get in the chat on both Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Links are in both the Twitter description as well as the YouTube. Love to have you guys join us. But again, for this week, we're going to be doing an early 53-man projection. And it's just going to be the offensive side. Next week, we're going to jump into the defensive side. Wanted to give a little more wiggle time. But first, I wanted to start out. I told the guys this. I wanted to start off with a little bit of a interesting, posed question. And so my thought is, let's talk about Brandon Beane and his legacy. We know when Brandon Beane took over in 2017, he had his work cut out for him with a roster filled with players that most likely needed to be cut and a salary cap that needed serious upheaval. He definitely had to work diligently. We know he did some stunning moves, trading Sammy Watkins, trading Ronald Darby. He drafted Josh Allen instead of Josh Rosen, and then bringing in free key agents like Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Mitch Morse. There's been a ton of moves that Brandon Beane has really put his stamp on. So what I'm going to ask you guys is, what does Brandon Beane, has he done enough at this point to surpass Bill Polian as the greatest general manager of the Buffalo Bills?
We'll let you start, Joe.
Oh, I was doing the same thing. I was deferring. I don't know. This might not be a popular answer. I don't know why we do this. I don't know why the younger crowd has to find a way to qualify if whether or not what we're witnessing now is better than what they grew up hearing about over the last 17 years. And I get it that there was a lot of, not winning, and there was a lot of looking back, and a lot of the way that it was, and a lot of the way that it used to be. And the Sabres are kind of in that same boat. I mean, I grew up with the French Connection and hearing about Gilbert Perreault and all those guys and like idolizing players I never saw play football. Play hockey, but I never, I don't know how to answer this question. Brandon Beane, he's one good solid argument away with Terry Pegula of going the way that Bill Polian went, which was what happened. Bill Polian and Ralph Wilson got entangled and couldn't get along, and the Bills jettisoned the greatest general manager of that era, probably, right? So Brandon Beane is great. He's phenomenal. Bill Polian is in the Hall of Fame. Brandon Beane is potentially headed in that direction. I just don't know why we have to, and I don't mean to ruin the topic. I just don't know why we have to. I'm old, so at 49 in 3 weeks, to me, I just don't know why we do this. Greg?
Well, no, I don't disagree. The desire to always rank everything and make everything lists it does get crazy sometimes. I'm pretty comfortable saying not yet. I don't think that it's fair, even with how impressive the work Brandon Beane has done in only 5 short years, 4.5
Right.
years, however you want to call it, certainly is an amazing pace. But as Joe touched on, I think that Bill Polian acquired 6 Hall of Famers, and then he was the 7th. That range, or I guess 5. Depending, I guess I don't know for sure if he hired Marv or how that worked. But that kind of talent acquisition and roster building is what Brandon Beane is aspiring to. And yes, of course, we didn't finish it, but building a team that went to 4 straight Super Bowls
Right.
is an unparalleled
Right.
achievement in football history. So I don't think there's anything negative in saying that Brandon Beane hasn't surpassed that yet. He's incredible. I think he's very much in the argument for the best GM in the NFL right now. That's awesome. But I think you can be that and also not have surpassed the Hall of Fame guy who did it 30 years ago. But he's certainly on an impressive pace to this point.
Agreed. Well said.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not to dig up old roots and, feel as though we have to sit there and slander one over the other. I know the conversation right now is, has Josh Allen surpassed Jim Kelly as the greatest?
Just ask my co-host. He'll tell you it's already done.
Oh, yeah.
Also mine from the Hump Day Hotline last year told me that he had already passed Jim Kelly.
Oh, yeah. So it's
amazing
intriguing
that we can have these discussions. It's fantastic. These are awesome problems to deal with. This is great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For the longest time, it was which was the worst general manager in the past 20 years. So it's
John Fina would tell you Tom Donahoe. John Fina does not like Tom Donahoe.
Which is, it's funny. I'm gonna leave this next part off because I'm not gonna dig deeper. But I was actually gonna ask where Brandon Beane, if you had to put him in like history of the best general managers, where you think he would fall. I had Tom Donahoe on this list for what he did in Pittsburgh. Because he actually did. He had a very nice job.
Yeah.
I mean, nice job in Pittsburgh. Not as great in Buffalo.
So much of the rest of our history, it pales so far in comparison from that 90s window that almost everything we're seeing now very soon or already is the second best thing that's ever happened, because the electric company run that was there, or going all the way back to the 60s with in that stretch there, it's really hard to compare much beyond those.
I don't know where you would put him all time. I mean, Scott Pioli when he was with the Patriots was great. I mean, there's a lot of great names that are out there. I can think of some others, but yeah, it's who cares? He's awesome right now.
Sure is. He's
Right.
a fantastic GM.
Yep.
So let's get right into this. Kevin said he'll be here with us momentarily.
By the way, point of note, he was late for the last show too. So
Oh boy.
Unacceptable.
Oh boy.
Unacceptable.
So we'll leave that in the back burner and make sure to flare him for it. So all that said and done, the big topic tonight is the early 53-man projection. Obviously, with the Bills roster, a big thing is it's hard to make. It is locked and loaded, full of talent from number 1 to number 53. And I think the biggest thing that you've seen is a lot of UDFAs didn't even want to come here because they knew they would have had a serious uphill battle just trying to get onto the roster. So at this point, I think, when I was going through, I didn't see a lot of variance. I didn't, from last year's roster to this year's roster. I mean, you're talking these camp battles are going to be, I do not envy Brandon Beane. I do not envy Sean McDermott, and I don't envy the position coaches, because these decisions are going to be unbelievably difficult.
agreed.
So, I'm sorry.
No, it's interesting. We'll talk about it as we go here. There's been such a series of each year, like other GMs and other organizations kind of circling the Bills cut down day like vultures and getting there. And that'll happen again this year. But I almost think as time goes on, Brandon Beane started with more of a shotgun approach, just needing to bring in as much as possible and then see how it falls. And then he's gotten more refined and more accurate and better. And as we did this, and I did the prep, and I'd done kind of a 53-man projection before and kind of looked at it again, it's not super hard. Like, it's so many of the positions, like, yep, it's those 4.
Right.
Yep, it's those 5. Yep,
Right.
It's those. Like, he's gotten more and more refined of what he wants and what we're looking for, and a lot of this roster kind of is in place at what it's going to be. So there are a couple spots where other teams are going to be circling like they have in years past, but a couple of them it's like, nope, the really good guys are going to make it, and the other guys are going to be camp bodies and try out, and we're all set. And it's going to be interesting. I'm curious if we have any big curveballs tonight.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start right off at the top. I
So
think
we
the
cut Josh
quarterback-
Allen. All right, sorry.
Yeah, let's get into it. I think the quarterback position's pretty cut and dry. I personally, the only big variance I had was I think Matt Barkley going to the practice squad. I can't see them carrying 3 this year.
We probably need to get from the master, the man, the myth, legend himself. I'm sure he knows what the practice squad rules are. I believe the COVID rules are still in effect, but do you want to give us a breakdown of what the COVID rules are?
So it's interesting. There actually is an element that needs to be approved by the owners, that when they did the initial set where it bumped to 16, they removed the limitation on veteran players. They removed the limitation on movement back and forth and how many times you could be pulled back and go back to the practice squad. They added the protection element where you could protect, up to 3 players each week. All of that was actually initially introduced as a 2-year pilot, a 2-year mechanism, and it was 2020 and 2021. So they didn't last year. They just kind of had to confirm, yep, we're going to keep going. No one had any concern with it. This year, it will actually take like a formal resolution or whatever they call it when the owners process that kind of function. So from everything I've heard and from everything that's been reported, there's a lot of momentum that, yes, it's been great. All the teams benefit from it. The NFLPA likes it because it was actually better pay for the practice squad guys, and it was more guys getting roster time and getting chances to get pulled up. So it seems like a pretty easy win-win, but technically they would need to change that. Otherwise, it would go back to the 10-man practice squad, back to only 1 or 2 veteran players out of the 10. No more protections. All those different functions would go back to the previous rules. I don't expect that, but technically they need to extend it to make it official.
Okay. So to clarify, do you expect Matt Barkley to be able to be put on the practice squad, or?
Yes, I would go forward with every expectation that will be the case. And even beyond that, I think their logic of QB3 on the practice squad is worth being that one exception. Like if they're going to go that route and that costs a Joe Giles Harris a practice squad spot, or that costs some other player at that kind of veteran role a practice squad spot, I almost think they would value the QB3 consistency as that spot. And Matt Barkley's in that perfect zone of good enough to be QB3, good enough to want in the room every day, but not quite good enough that he's going to be claimed by another team when they waive him. Like, he's right in that sweet spot that makes sense.
Yeah, and I want to say he was waived by, I think, 2 or 3 teams last season, so I don't think they'd have to worry too much.
Yeah, the only team that's picking him up when he gets waived is the Rams, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's pretty, for clerical reasons, pretty clear that we're going Case Keenum, Josh Allen,
no
quarterback room,
no argument for me.
And if I'd like to add just I don't know, a musing of my own. So I got to meet Case Keenum a couple weeks ago. Very normal looking dude, about 6'1", 6'2", unassuming, was wearing baggy jeans and a polo shirt. I was like, are you my uncle? Like, it was very,
are you an NFL player?
Basically, Kyle Orton.
He was. Yeah, but Kyle Orton was 6'5". Like, this dude is not big. He could have been at the family reunion next weekend. Like, literally.
Was Kyle Orton really that big? He was 6'5"?
I think he was 6'4", 6'5". He was a big, tall dude. Yep.
NFL quarterbacks are always sneaky huge.
Yeah.
Like, almost all of them.
If you remember, Kyle, all of his length was in from his foot to his knee. He had those gigantic shins, remember? His shins were enormous.
That's hysterical. I will say, just a quick aside on Case Keenum. I know a lot of people have debated, like, is he better or worse than Mitch Trubisky? And I won't deny that if you force me to pick, I probably would slightly take Trubisky on the field. But one sneaky area that I'm excited about, as we transition from the Brian Dable into the first year of, having Ken Dorsey as the offensive coordinator. I love the idea of Case Keenum in that room with them, that he's seen a million different defensive schemes, still holds pretty much every NCAA passing record that's on the books, and has a lot to bring to that room in his mindset and experience, and building game plans and building, picking out coverages and schemes that'll fit. That I think that he brings something to the room that Trubisky wouldn't, even if maybe I'd take him 52-48, on the field. I might take Trubisky. Keenum's also very capable on the field to step in, but I think his overall contribution is a plus.
Yeah, Trubisky's clearly the athletic leader of the two, but Keenum has that gunslinger mentality that Allen has, which to me, if you're going to sub one out, so if Allen has to go out for 2 games or 4 games, I'd rather have a dude in there that's thinking like Josh Allen is thinking, versus maybe, Trubisky. It'll be interesting to see who he becomes, right? We obviously didn't see who he was here, and he was becoming something in Chicago. So I'm kind of in the same boat with Greg on that one.
And last year, stepped in for Cleveland, went 2-0. It's exactly the plan. That if you need him, he comes in and wins. That's what you need.
Please do that.
I almost could see the backup quarterback position being kind of what Josh Norman or Vontae Davis, kind of a rotational every year veteran 1-year wonder type of situation. So it fills that nice void.
Yeah.
So let's get right into running backs. I know this is probably going to be a little variance there. Joe, if you want to kick it off.
Running back wise, so I did a gigantic show yesterday, or I should say Sunday night, on the Overreaction Sports podcast, and just basically went through the running back room. And I started the breakdown with Aaron Kromer, and there was a lot of information that I actually gleaned from, believe it or not, Cover One, and a lot of the work that they did just from Aaron Kromer, because everything to me starts up front. But when I have a conversation, or when I think about this running back room, and this is kind of where I went, Devin Singletary, and I've said this for the last couple years, the Bills have done everything that they could possibly do to basically get Devin Singletary to the bench. And Devin Singletary, like a bad rash, just won't go away. No matter what they try the wide zone, they try to do something, they try to force a run scheme, they try to force guys, they go get Matt Breida, because what we need is speed in the backfield. And who ends up starting and who ends up playing most of the plays by the end of the season? Devin Singletary. They bench him because he drops a pass. He ends up back in the game the next week or whatever, taking over. If he fumbles, same thing. So Devin Singletary, to me, makes this roster without a doubt. Now, well, after that, obviously you've got James Cook. James Cook's not going anywhere. So James Cook, to me, is an important player, potentially to the future of this franchise, just because of, where they took him, the weapon that they expect him to be. And the jury is out. So he has never had more than 12 carries in his career in college. I think he had double-digit carries twice, and one of those times was 12 was the max. So we don't necessarily know what he is. There's a lot of people that are concerned about his size. So he's an inch taller than his brother, 9 pounds lighter. He's also young, so he could put on 10, 15, 20 pounds relatively easy. Does that mean that he turns into Dalvin Cook? No. However, he is a weapon. He's very fast. Contact balance was a big part of his game, or a concern of his game. But a lot of times when people hit him, he was running full speed. And if you're going full speed and somebody glances at your legs, contact balance is going to be an issue versus trying to plow through the middle of the line. So all that to say, James Cook is right. He's going to be on this football team. We have yet to see how he's going to get utilized this year. Zach Moss is where it gets interesting. Zach Moss, Duke Johnson. So Zach Moss is a guy that we learned actually from Jay Spence the King's interview with him, that he has had screws in his ankle all last year, which he said very much hindered him. He said, I was not right all last season. I'm excited about 2022 and being fully healthy. I believe personally the Bills are going to give him every chance. They drafted him in the 3rd round. He's got 2 more years on his contract. They're not going to cut bait on him yet, I don't believe. And if he can find his way behind an improved offensive line with Roger Saffold, Ryan Rick Bates on the right side, and obviously solidifying what's going on up front, it'll be interesting to see with Aaron Kromer working that offensive line. It'll be interesting to see where he pans out. Duke Johnson, to me, is the guy. So this is where it comes back. As much as we want to talk about Barkley to the practice squad, Duke Johnson is the question. Is Duke Johnson going to be willing to go to the practice squad to basically ride the coattails of this team to a Super Bowl championship? Or is he a guy that's going to want to make his last $2 million, is 1.5? So when I see this offense, I think there's 3 guys that are going to play on Sundays, not including Taiwan Jones. It's going to be Singletary, Zach Moss, James Cook, and James Cook is probably going to play all over the field versus the 2 guys, Singletary and Moss, like we've seen the last couple of years. But Greg, I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, you're spot on. I think that you picked the only 2 100% locks are Devin Singletary and James Cook.
Yes.
Obviously, you throw Taiwan Jones in this room because for some reason they call him a running back. He hasn't had a carry in a decade, but technically he's a running back, so we'll count him here. The only 2 locks are Devin Singletary and James Cook. You might even get me to say that Taiwan Jones might be the next closest to a lock out of that group, but special teams captain and brought him back again at some point. It's gonna go one step too far that he lost a step, so it's possible that this year. So I'll stop short of calling him a lock. But if anyone saw, he was the person who led the team response to the tragedy, in Buffalo here, and you can see how much he matters in that locker room.
Yeah.
But then it absolutely is Zach Moss versus Duke Johnson, and I agree. I don't know if I see any path where Zach Moss is released. I'll say there's a small chance that he's the cut down day trade guy if they got the right offer. But I think I agree. I think I have it that Moss is the more likely candidate, and that James Cook was really the death knell for Duke Johnson. They obviously wanted that role. They went after J.D. McKissick. Obviously, I don't think if the McKissick signing sticks, I don't think they pick Cook in the second round.
Probably right.
Not that they wouldn't pick any running back, but maybe I don't think it bumps that down as the tiebreaker. They could have gone another direction there, and then obviously when they pick him, that's a tough shot for Johnson. And I like Raheem Blackshear as a practice squad person, but I don't think he has a real shot at the roster. So, and then depending on, we'll talk about it later in the show. Do you count Reggie Gilliam here? Do you count him as a tight end?
Right.
Depends on where you slot him as fullback or tight end. But I do count 4 running backs, 5 if you count Gilliam. Is my roster. I have the same 4.
It was interesting to me because as I was doing just kind of my homework last night for the show yesterday, when you look at the group that's there, not excluding Taiwan Jones, the only one that's good at pass blocking is Duke Johnson. Like Duke Johnson is a legitimate, ready to pass block all day long, and you have to wonder if the Bills are like, when they get into that moment, if they're just going to be like, we haven't had a running back that can pass block before. Why do we need one now? So like even that skill that a lot of teams go for, and a lot of teams not require, but a lot of teams rely on or depend on to protect their quarterback. Josh Allen is so elusive back there, and his vision and his pocket awareness and his presence is so good. The Bills can literally punt on that. Duke, you're great at that, but we don't need it. So.
One of his sneakiest stats last year for Josh Allen was the percentage of pressures versus sacks, and how high the number of pressures were and how low the number of sacks were. I know he buys the offensive line presents. They probably should have bought him presents at Christmas time.
He made many defenders look silly, like a couple times with a head bob here or a shoulder shrug. Like there was a couple times the dude just grabbed air. It was great.
Oh, the week 5 where he juked the KC defender out of his shoes.
Right.
Pretty bad.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Kevin.
We got Kevin Massar joining us. Kevin, you missed your intro, but I'm gonna do it.
Nice, appreciate it.
For sake, Kevin Massar is here from Cover One and also the Going Deep podcast. Kevin, just to fill you in, we did cover the quarterbacks. Josh Allen's safe. We're good.
Okay,
he made it. It was a debate, but he made it.
He's good there. So
are we
we
keeping
moved on.
Jake Fromm? That's the real question.
We're bringing him back to cut him again. So for running backs, obviously Joe and Greg have already covered their end. Go right ahead. Obviously there's some interesting ones in there, so we'll see what you got.
I think the running back room is pretty interesting to me. I've never really been a Zach Moss guy. So I think just first and foremost, I think he struggled. I didn't even like him at times in his rookie year. But I was hoping and I did like him in college. I like some film that he put out, but I don't think he makes the roster. That's my first hot take. I think Bean will try to move him in one of his late round draft pick moves that he tries to make for his compensation pick formula game that he likes to play. So that's the first idea and one of the top players that sticks out to me on what they could do at that position there. Obviously, Devin Singletary is probably as close to a lock as can be without being 100%. And obviously, they're going to keep their rookie. So you got Cook, you got Singletary, you got Taiwan Jones, obviously the aforementioned Taiwan Jones. So those are the three I think that are fairly safe. And I think that they want to see what they can get out of Duke Johnson. I think that they like that presence. And I think that that's who they generally have gone with. But I'm still holding out hope from one of my favorite UDFAs in Blackshear. I think he brings a special dynamic to the table. And I think that he can do a little bit of what they're looking for in that Duke Johnson battle. So most likely Duke Johnson, but I'm not going to be shocked for Blackshear being on the practice squad, as well as who knows what they'll do there, but they'll generally lean toward the vet. So that's kind of how I had my running back room broken down. And I think that with the two younger players, I think Moss is traded, maybe Blackshear. There's an outside chance, but I am leaning Duke Johnson, but don't count out them adding to that position group. Really, don't count it out.
I think the problem when you're talking about roster building, and Greg said that, that Zach Moss, he doesn't really see a path to him being off the roster necessarily. He did say that there's a potential for him to be traded, obviously on cutdown day. So he agrees with you there. But when you're talking about roster building, and I would pose this to both or all three of you, if Zach Moss goes, Duke Johnson isn't exactly here in 2023.
Right.
Devin Singletary also gone potentially in 2023. Now you're left with James Cook. So I think to me that changes that conversation, because it turns into the difference between we got to have a guy right now or we got to make this the best room we can versus, what do we have in the future, right? So I the Bills are just in a luxury position here. I'd love to hear a take on that, because for me, I could see Zach Moss being here for the next 2 years to kind of stave off that need to draft another running back next year or go get a guy.
That's my exact thought right there, is that by keeping Zach Moss, so my guys are James Cook, Devin Singletary. I've got Zach Moss making the roster, though I think it could be a late trade, but my thought by keeping him, you've got 3 big contracts coming up next year with Ed Oliver, Dawson Knox, and then
Poyer, Edmonds.
Yeah, Poyer, Edmonds, a lot of guys. So, keeping Zach Moss on his extra year, one more year of his contract, which is significantly more affordable than the alternative, is something I think Brandon Beane's going to want to do. I mean, at the end of the day, Brandon Beane has talked about the fact that he has to do some gymnastics now. What? It's one thing before Josh Allen got that big contract, but now we're going to be walking into those 30 and 40 and almost $50 million cap hits. And so you're going to have to start, being a little more flexible. In terms of the last guy I got Taiwan Jones making the roster. I know people keep saying like you can't always keep all these special teamers, but at that same time, you still got to have some veteran presence in that room. You still got to have guys that play pivotal roles. And, Taiwan Jones is one of those guys, when you see him get up and he gets busted in the face with no helmet on and he gets back up and he's ready to go the next week. That's the type of stuff that McDermott bleeds for, lives for. That's exactly the type of coach that he wants and wants the players to be like. So I'd be hard pressed to see them strip away all of these players just because they want to make an extra roster spot for, maybe that's somebody on the cusp.
Well, and he also a team captain, and like we before Kevin jumped on, we mentioned he led the team, response to the tragedy downtown. So, I do think there's an area. I think, Joe, your point is very sound in the logic of it. I will say the position where you can be as loosey-goosey as any is at running back. That's one of the most plug-and-play positions,
Agreed.
whether it be a veteran free agent or a draft pick. So I agree. I think I'd be pretty surprised if literally James Cook is the only player under contract coming back. That's different than, hey, we only have 2 and we still need another one,
Right.
Something like that. Because even if they keep Moss, they still have Singletary's contract expiring, and it certainly seems like with their draft pick, history here, that it's much more likely they pick another guy rather than re-sign Singletary for a longer contract. But I think that could be the tiebreaker for Moss, even if Johnson obviously does fit the mold they're looking for now with, McKissick and then Cook and Johnson.
Solid.
Absolutely. So let's I think we've pretty much,
Yeah.
you know,
The next one's probably the most fun one for the show, so I'm excited about this one.
Absolutely. Obviously, the wide receiver group is one with, you know, we took Khalil Shakir this year. You've got an up and comer and Gabe Davis. And then it gets a little interesting. Obviously, Stephon Diggs is a lock. Nobody even needs to discuss it. But there is some interest, you know, intrigue in here. And I've got a major curveball in mind. So I'm excited.
Lead it off then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Curveball.
Can't tease us like that.
The guy that I've been pounding the table for is Odell Beckham Jr.
I'm out.
I honestly believe you can get him for, I don't want to say bargain barrel prices, but you're talking he's coming off an ACL injury. He's probably not going to be ready till late October, maybe November,
December
or later.
probably.
Yeah, right, even later. So you could literally sign him just for a playoff push, a late run. And he proved last year that Rams team, he was the Rams offense.
For sure.
And even just adding somebody like him late.
Well, you say that, except for Cooper Kupp had 151 receptions, and I don't even like a bajillion, like 2,400, was it 2,200 yards? Like, yeah.
Insane stretch. Yeah, I will say, Beckham Jr. is probably on pace to be the Super Bowl MVP when he went out. Like, it ended up being, a Kupp rightfully after that point. But up until that point, when he went out, he was killing it. And I do think they're very randomly. So I pulled a calf muscle, which is a weird thing to pull, but I'm old now, so that's what happens. I went to my orthopedics this morning, kind of going through like, hey, what do I do? This fucking hurts. This is terrible. And he's a huge Bills fan, and we got talking about the Bills, and we got talking about Odell Beckham Jr. and he had brought up that a lot of us are getting ahead of ourselves in that a lot of times the second injury to the same knee, your recovery process, they need to be even more deliberate. And with where he's at, he actually said if you gave me odds, I would wager he's not able to play this year.
Wow.
But he said, they're amazing athletes. Lots of crazy things happen. But the second injury on the same knee and the process they go through to fully rehab and rebuild that, he said his guess was that it would be very late season, if at all, and that he might be surprised if he's able to play again this season. But we'll see where that goes. I do think it's a fun addition to talk about for the stretch run if you were able to sprinkle someone like that in, because I wouldn't mind another outside receiver to. If something happened to Davis or Diggs, it's kind of sketchy of who would play outside. So I don't mind the idea. But yeah, it might be somebody who could contribute earlier that jumps in.
Yeah, and I think so. That was, obviously a big shot in the dark, and whether it happens or not is beyond me. I mean, Brandon Beane has proven he does not shy away.
Von Miller
from
could just pick
anything.
up the phone.
Right, exactly. Outside of that, I think Isaiah McKenzie has a role in this team. He's proven he's beloved by the franchise, beloved by the fans. And I'll be honest, I still don't think he gets enough of an opportunity. I think he's got more speed than he made clock in a 40. He's definitely elusive. No, he's not game breaking, though he wasn't against New England. But he has a role, and he's very good at it. And he's a guy that a lot of people rally around. I mean, you saw when he had that big game against New England, the sideline was going ballistic for the guy because he's that type of talent. And then obviously Khalil Shakir, I think he has a big opportunity this year. I mean, Stephon Diggs is always going to draw potential double coverage. Gabriel Davis is now going to have a lot more eyes on him. You could see a guy like Khalil Shakir or a guy like Jamison Crowder have a bigger year than usual, just purely based on the fact that Dawson Knox, Stephon Diggs, and Gabe Davis are going to be drawing all the coverage and leaving quite a few open areas, little zones in pockets for them to be, really successful. So that would be my 6 guys.
Kevin, you go ahead and go.
I think I'm going to play this one straight up this time. So for me, I'm probably going to take the 6, but I mean, they've shown the willingness to have a few more lately with the depth on the roster and maybe allocating one to special teams with their, we talk about special teams player. It's not my favorite tactic. I complain about it a lot, especially to have blunders at the end of playoff games. But to me, it has its validation, and I do think that they could roster a special teams only player. I think part of that also plays a role in the return game, right? So you got Khalil Shakir probably eligible to win that job. Is Isaiah McKenzie going to win that back as well? So you have that battle going on. Players are a little redundant in a way. So does that matter? I like Isaiah McKenzie. I think he makes the roster, and he's always beaten out his competition here in Buffalo. So to me, he's on the roster. But obviously the two locks at the top, the two boundary receivers in Diggs and Davis. I think Crowder's a lock. I think, but I've seen weirder things happen, like especially with the depth of this room. So I'm gonna put him in for now, but training camp could come and something could happen. Isaiah McKenzie could show out, and Crowder gets hurt, and that could be all she wrote for him. So that's the three players that I have there, obviously starting as of right now. But Khalil Shakir, obviously, I do have making the roster. I have Isaiah McKenzie making the roster as well to kind of round out like who may see the majority of snaps. But then like you really can't count out the fact of like do they like Stevenson still? Do they like Hodgins still? Those guys do have a battle to have. But Jake Kumaro, I have him on the roster. I think that as of right now, until somebody proves, and maybe it's Hodgins, maybe it's nobody, but until somebody proves that they can take those special teams, has a little bit of a slight package role on the offense. They've tried at times, but I do have him making I do have Kumaro making the roster right now. They've shown the propensity to keep a player like him.
Me or you, Greg?
Go ahead.
This is tough for me, and the reason that it's tough for me is because when Beasley left, and then they re-signed Ike, my full expectation was that he was going to be the slot guy after what we saw him do against New England and a couple other games. To me, as much as he isn't a traditional slot guy, it was clear they had routes for him. They had stuff that he could do to kind of be a weapon in that spot, and then they go get Jamison Crowder, the best weapon the Jets had last year, and I was like, oh, okay. So you re-signed him and you went and got, like, to me, I think Kevin used the word redundancy. I'm not sure that both of them are necessarily needed. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure how I feel about McKenzie returning kicks and punts. So to me, I'm a little on the edge on that one. One thing I can tell you, and if you just, and you can, and you'll agree with me if you think about it, the Bills value wide receivers that can play all the positions. And if you think about what's happened with Emmanuel Sanders leaving, Emmanuel Sanders played his position. Stephon Diggs plays his position. Gabe Davis is capable of playing all the positions. And the Bills value that. And that's one of the things that they like about Khalil Shakir. That's also one of the things that they like about Isaiah Hodgins. So they're going to be looking for somebody to step into that Gabe Davis role that Gabe Davis has kind of filled the last couple of years. The question is who? And where does that put a guy like Marquez Stevenson? Because to me, the guy that kind of fills that role for Gabe Davis, that he's vacating, if you will, to become a boundary receiver is Isaiah Hodgins or, Khalil Shakir, who's a rookie. There's no way Khalil Shakir is getting waived because he's getting scooped. Somebody's taking him. He's gone. There's probably less risk in waiving Isaiah Hodgins, but what does that do to the mentality and the psyche of Isaiah Hodgins, who, first year was put down because of an injury. Year two ended up having an injury in preseason that got him on the roster as far as on the practice squad, and he did play in one game. I just don't know. Whereas Khalil Shakir's not. There's no way they're going to waive him. And then you got, like I said, and Kevin talked about, Marquez Stevenson, who I felt was uncuttable last year. And then what did the Bills do? He's got a phantom foot injury and he's hurt for the next 6 weeks, right? So I mean, they kind of shuffled and they kind of worked through that as well. I don't know what the answer is in this situation. I'm looking for somebody to kind of bring me some wisdom because I feel like I know what the Bills want. I feel like there's talented guys, even some unearthed talent when you talk about Isaiah Hodgins and what they said about him his rookie season with Gabe Davis on the roster. Everybody was opining about him as far as like being the guy and being like exceeding every expectation. And then obviously they shut him down due to his shoulder. You're beyond Gabe Davis, Jamison Crowder, right? Stephon Diggs and Isaiah McKenzie. Your guess is as good as Khalil Shakir, because he's a rookie. Your guess is as good as mine on who fills that kind of last space that's not a special teamer.
Yeah, spot on. I think that the top five are locks. I do think that Diggs, Gavis, Crowder, McKenzie, Shakir. Crowder and McKenzie more so because it costs as much or more to release them than it does to keep them. You know, it's 1.87 guaranteed for Crowder and 1.25 for McKenzie. So something would have to go pretty wrong to just eat that and let them go for no actual savings. And then I agree on Shakir, although I think Shakir might bring some of that versatility, and I do think that it is a shot to the competition for McKenzie long term, because he can do virtually everything that McKenzie does in jet sweeps, line up in the backfield, inside, outside, kick return, punt return, except he's probably 4 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier.
You're talking about Shakir?
Yeah.
That's the thing about Hodgins as well. Hodgins is the tallest wide receiver on the team.
For sure. And I was a big fan of Hodgins coming out. I don't tell anyone, but I thought he was better than Gabe Davis. That was some idiot must have told me that.
You're not an idiot. It remains to be seen.
I was going to say, who's to know?
What happens if he makes the roster and gets to play and ends up with 40 catches this year, and we're all like, holy crap.
Yeah. So having that option, the challenge you run into is what, I think almost all of us are locked in that, hey, those 5 are there. Yeah. I don't think they're going to keep 7, not because they don't want it, but because we're so deep everywhere else. Where are you going to cut from to be able to keep that 7th guy? We'll get to it in the next position. Maybe they go crazy with only keeping 2 there, but I think it's going to be 6. So then you're talking about somebody pretty solid out of, and I agree with your 3. It's Stevenson, Hodgins, and Kumaro. Kumaro has so much special teams ability and can actually play outside receiver. Like, he's a functional NFL receiver. He's not anything special, but he can run routes. He's a functional receiver. He's more of a receiver than Taiwan Jones is a running back. He's more of a receiver than Tyler Medikevich is a linebacker. Those guys are net negatives when they're on the field at their position. He's functional as a receiver. So if somebody had to step in, he could do it. So I think I agree with Kevin that I think unless I see I like a Christian Benford or someone like that take that, he's Kumaro is kind of like the whatever you call the next in from the gunner. He's like not the absolute, not with Taiwan and Saran Neal, but he's the next guy in on both units, and out there as a key part of the coverage units. So if someone like a Christian Benford or someone else can take that role that allows them to not have to do it, or Terrell Bernard early on, because you didn't have AJ Klein on every coverage unit, so maybe that gives them, they need somebody else that was also filling a roster spot last year to play that role and that one other special teams role, because I don't think Isaiah Hodgins or Marcus Stevenson are going to be covering kicks. I don't think that's in their skill set. So they would need the good fortune of them playing well enough to just straight up beat out Kumaro, because if he could just look better, and someone at some other position taking a double duty as a linebacker, DB, or safety that could take that role that Kumaro was doing covering, and then I think they could take that 6th role. But I think they need both things to happen: someone else to win a job and them to beat out Kumaro. Otherwise, I think he has enough of a tiebreaker that he'd take it.
What makes this all easier is if they just wouldn't rotate 11 or 12 guys on the defensive line or whatever it is. Cut it back a little bit. Von Miller said, I want to play every down. So there we go. Like, let him play every down. Give us a 7th wide receiver, and the content creators can all figure all this out.
Yeah, make it easier.
There's also like weird thought that he could potentially see more than just 2 or 3 years of his contract. So
hey, I'll take him at his word. It's when he talked about it, he said, look at Tom Brady, look at Bruce Smith. I keep myself in the best shape in the NFL. I'm playing all 6 years. They have options after they get past the 2nd and 3rd year. Right. But if he's playing great, God bless him. Keep catching checks. Yeah,
absolutely.
Good with me.
I mean, the guy's got the most detailed closet in the NFL. I can only assume he's probably got, an unbelievable, healthcare system.
And you're redoing some deals then at that point too.
Yeah, we're kicking so many cans down the road at that point. Anyways, it's gonna be funny money at that point. I will say he's had 2 like catastrophic injuries that he missed time. Otherwise, he misses 0 time.
Right.
Like, he doesn't ever have like a game off here, a game off there, other than the 2 seasons where it was literally a blown out knee and an Achilles. he plays every game. Like he's there all the time. So that's at least encouraging that when he plays 75 to 85% of snaps in every single game.
Mhm.
Yeah,
He doesn't have those
absolutely.
soft tissue injuries that
Yeah.
keep you out for 2-3 weeks. The Milano call it
Yeah,
or something.
yeah,
He doesn't.
yeah.
He doesn't have it. He plays through it, and just it's super valuable to the team, and hence probably why they dug a little deeper to make it happen.
That will be the interesting part with Crowder, though. Crowder actually is known to have a ton of soft tissue injuries. So
Yeah, Roger Saffold was similar.
yeah, it'll be
Saffold
intriguing.
started every game, but only finished like 12 out of 17. I think
That's
it
why
was.
there's a sneaky on this
Yeah.
position group of like, is Crowder? Do they keep him if he gets hurt in training camp? I don't know.
No.
Like that's
That would be the path. More so, I think it would be who'd they do it with? The Voshon Joseph? Who is the one where they kept him? Isaiah Hodgins, I think, might have been the first one, or Stevenson, where he makes it that day, and then all of a sudden he gets put on the in-season IR, and they stash him for a little bit,
I think it was
and then
Stevenson
sign
last
someone
year.
back. Yeah, so
Hodgins got cut.
yeah, I'll credit Joe Biscaglia put it in one of his articles that Jake Kumro's that guy this year. He's a vested veteran. That the old Andre Roberts, hey, here's an extra $100,000 to go wait in the parking lot, and then we'll call you back tomorrow.
Right.
That kind of deal, that they could do that with Kumro this year,
Okay,
which would make
So
sense with
likely.
Crowder if it was
That's
Crowder. they had to
I
be
see that
stashed.
happening, and I think you're going to have a mysterious. Also, on top of the vet cut, you're also going to have a mysterious injury in that group to hopefully have somebody
Yeah.
in 7 weeks.
Some young guy is going to have a weird lower back injury.
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's get right into the tight end group. Obviously, we all know Dawson Knox ain't going anywhere, and he is. I wouldn't be surprised in line. I mean, every single year he's progressed, and last year he improved on every stat from the year before. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a monster year. Actually, in fact, Dave King had a comment right here. Dave wrote, "Why is it not showing up? What are we doing here?" There it is. With Knox's season last year, I wouldn't be surprised to see him pick up more targets next year. He can shoulder the burden, God forbid any injuries to the receiver core. I agree wholeheartedly. I think Dawson Knox has become incredibly trusted by Josh. And when it comes to Josh, I mean, if you're trusted, you're going to see a lot of targets. And Dawson Knox has proven not only to be one of the best red zone targets in the NFL, but his hands have improved. I know that was a big point of contention with a lot of fans. He saw an eye doctor. He did a lot of, eye testing, a lot of eye hand movement testing, and it definitely paid dividends. He had his drops, but everybody does throughout the season. But you saw a massive increase in his productivity and his dependability for sure.
He caught 69% of his targets. It's hard to be nicer than that.
Right.
Yeah.
Good
Yep.
for Rob Boris, by the way, too.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
a development story too. Like a failed Rams coordinator in the Jeff Fisher era, failed, I guess. But by all accounts, like what a development story for his resume, and looking for an offensive coordinator job again. If we have another coach plucked here in Buffalo, I don't know. He's got to put his name in there soon. So it's an interesting story what he was able to do with Knox, and maybe get a little toy in OJ Howard, but. And these rooms are lean for him too. He doesn't have 15 guys in his rooms like the D-line coach. Like he has 2 guys in his rooms right now. And I'm not shocked if they have 2. I mean, it's not outlandish. Like Greg said last segment, they dip into this unit to find a roster spot to keep the 2 great guys, have Sweeney on the practice squad or Watermeyer on the practice squad, etc. Quentin Morris, they like too. Who knows? Practice squad players, roster 2, elevate one if you need to, or roster him after an injury or whatever. But to me, 2 roster spots here is very likely. I don't think it's outlandish to say that they'll keep 2 in order to keep Benfords, to keep a Kumaro, etc.
It'll be interesting to see for me with Ken Dorsey moving into that coordinator role, the fingerprint that he's going to put on it, because the Bills are positioned and poised to go bigger between Knox and Sweeney. If Hodgins can make this roster like a bigger guy, Gabe Davis is a bigger guy. It'll be interesting just to see what they do. And then they've got a couple flash players in McKenzie and then Cook below him. I just exactly what you said, Kevin. I think that they basically roll with 2. They roll with Knox and Howard. I'm not sure Sweeney makes this roster. I think Sweeney, they're kind of at the point where we like the mustache. We've seen what you can do. Give us one of the younger dudes. I think that's just kind of where it's at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be intriguing with OJ Howard. his injury history is
For sure.
pretty daunting. And I know, his twitch or his acceleration is definitely hindered. I believe it was
What'd your orthopedic doctor say about that?
We didn't get into OJ Howard. I'll have to ask him when I go back. I didn't get into OJ Howard today.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, granted, his contract isn't prohibitive. I think it's what 1.8 million or something.
His was one of the ones where they kicked around some money, so it's 2.87 on the cap hit this year, but he's due 3.2 million, so it's enough that he's making this roster.
Yeah. The McKissick money, man. That's to me once McKissick bailed out, it's almost essentially what they were like. All right, we'll go upgrade tight end 2 instead of running back 2.
Joe talked about it too with the addition of Aaron Kromer and how much he likes the 2 tight end sets, and I have to assume that addition was blessed by Ken Dorsey and what he's looking for, and then you add in the David Quessenberry and what he can do as kind of a 6th lineman, how good of a run blocker he is. That I think they just want that arrow in their quiver that they can go with that 2 tight end heavy set and have a little more versatility to be able to do it. But the question is exactly where Joe pointed it. I think you can use Reggie Gilliam somewhat in that 3rd tight end role. I do think Jalen Weidemeyer is absolutely a threat to Tommy Sweeney, and I think that's at best 55-45, and I'll even put it, I think it's like 40% Sweeney, 35% Weidemeyer, and then a 25% chance that they don't keep a 3rd tight end. I think that all of those are in play. But
Quentin Morris percentage?
He's got a shot. He hung around on the practice squad, and it's always flavor of the month. So it's exciting to talk about Weidemeyer, but Morris has a shot there. I also think Thomas brought up OBJ is a lot sexier name, but this is also a spot where I could absolutely see a Jesse James or a Kyle Rudolph or someone like that come in that says, "Hey, I'd like to join the Super Bowl favorite roster and be your tight end 3."
Right.
And at this point in their career, that's exactly what they could be, is to come in and just be a steady presence who can block and can catch passes and can just be there available in case something happens to Knox and Howard. And I'd feel a lot better with a Rudolph or a Jesse James or even a Michael Pruitt, who was with Tennessee last year, versus Sweeney or probably even Weidemeyer, even though I know some people
Did Weidermeyer's signing bonus come out? I usually like to look at that sometimes.
I didn't. That is a nice indicator. I have not seen any details on his.
I had to imagine that's where a lot of their signing bonus is. That still a thing where you can only have a certain amount of UDFA signing bonus?
Yep. Yeah, there's a pool that they can go through.
I believe one of them was. I think one of the preferred was Alec Anderson. I believe. I think he was one of their major targets.
One of the O-line. One of the O-line guys. I think for me, I think that's telling, and I think that he's quite frankly a guy that you can stash as a priority UDFA. You're hoping he doesn't get plucked, and he is the guy, and maybe even Morse is on there too. And I don't know what the practice squad rules, if they're still changing or if you're still allowed to have certain vets on there. If you can keep Sweeney there too, and I think they'll play roster games, the tight end, unless what Greg was saying, and they do take a chance on a Rudolph, etc. for that position. But I do think that you'll see some double tight ends on the practice squad, come September.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think Weidemeyer is going to be interesting. I know everybody's got that, like Derrick Rogers favorite player that just, flashes in preseason and then unfortunately doesn't do much. But the one thing that's intriguing though with him is that he had a 0.9 RAS score, which is almost impossible to be that bad.
Kent said himself, no one's ever in the history of the NFL been a usable player with that tight end RAS.
Right. And yet he's unbelievably talented. I mean, he's athletic beyond measure. Yeah. It doesn't.
And
make
you
any
can
sense.
see there are stretches on film. He has one where he takes like a seam route for like a 60-70 yard touchdown, and he's pulling away from cornerbacks that I promise you those corners didn't run a 5-1. So I think some of it, now shame on him for not taking his preparation and being prepared to have a good combine and pro day, but it does not translate with how he looks on film. So I think there's at least something to that, again, it's not a positive, but I don't think it is not a correlation of, that's who he is as a player. Mm-hmm. It's just he had a horrific workout, and shame on him for not being ready for the job interview. That's your job interview, and he didn't take it seriously enough to be ready to do that. So that's not a positive by any means, but it's also not a direct indication of who he is as a player.
I will say it is, if you watch, there's a couple interviews with him, and he's from A&M, and apparently has a pretty good relationship with Von Miller. But one thing that he did mention is that with his pass blocking, he wants to go one-on-one with Von Miller, and see if he can go toe-to-toe. So I mean, he's got a hell of an aspiration to be good. Whether or not that translates is beyond me. So, but let's get into the O-line. I know, Joe, you had a really nice show with John Fina just recently, in terms of the O-line. Give us your rundown. What you think?
It's tough, right? Because it's funny. There's talent, and I'm kind of liking back to last season as well with like the Quisenberry signing, but you know who the top 5 are. And there was I saw a tweet today, I don't know who put it out, that do the Bills have the best offensive line in football? I don't know. I think they've got one of the best offensive line coaches in football. He's got an interesting bag of players. When you look at Deion Dawkins, who's undersized as a left tackle but very athletic, Roger Saffold, who's a road grader and graded very well last year, Mitch, who in my opinion is probably one of the best pulling centers in the NFL, Ryan Bates, who surprised us all when we were all screaming, why isn't Ryan Bates playing? And then he goes in and plays well. And then obviously Spencer Brown. It's about who's after them, right? So who's the 4 guys that are going to fill in? Ike has been on this team for a while, coming off an Achilles injury as well. Quisenberry. I think to me the question mark, and this kind of goes back to that Cover One stuff that I was kind of working through as I was setting up my show for this weekend. When you listen to what's that? Yeah, when you listen to Aaron, it was the Aaron Cromer videos that were posted years ago. When you listen to Aaron Cromer talk, and he talks about using a player's strengths to his advantage and taking whatever he has and basically allowing that to carry him to in the coaching. And one of the things that John Fina says about Cody Ford, and this is where I'm going with all this, is that Cody Ford has heavy feet. He's not light on his feet. He has heavy feet. And not only does he have heavy feet, a lot of times he takes the wrong first step, which puts him at a very big disadvantage. It'll be interesting for me to see if part of Aaron Cromer's job is to see if they can salvage that second round pick in Cody Ford. Can you create his base as a strength and give him leverage, right, to be a backup guard in this league, or a guy that can fill in when needed, or a rotational guy, or whatever. I don't know that I've got a pick. I don't know who's staying or sticking on from this offensive line. I'm extremely happy for the first time in a long time with the first 5. After that, to me, it's going to be Aaron. I trust Aaron Cromer as a teacher.
Yeah. Kevin?
Yeah. I mean, lots to, and I'm a big, so here's one guy the 5 we've talked about. There's no reason to get going on the projected starters right now. I really like what Quisenberry can do from the run blocking 6 offensive line standpoint. One of the best run blockers by some metrics in football. Struggles against pass. It's not a guy you probably want against Von Miller. But at the end of the day, like if he's playing, like I always say this, especially at the O-line, maybe not as relevant at the receiver position, but at the O-line, like you can't have Deion Dawkins behind Deion Dawkins behind Deion Dawkins. You just don't have top 20 offensive tackles coming off the bench. But to me, Quisenberry is a solid backup replacement tackle. I mean, you can play multiple roles, active on game day, decent salary. Like you don't have to worry about much with him. Has done it before, can spot start. If someone gets hurt mid-game, that kind of stuff is valuable. So I think to me, when you first sign him, everyone's like going off the rails, Bobby Hart 2.0, this kind of stuff. And it's like, it's just not fully accurate to me. So kind of to break down, I like Ike Butker a lot. I think that the team does too. They waived him. Andy Reid signed him from waivers. Andy Reid then waives him a couple weeks later. Brandon Beane's like, "Yep, I made a mistake," reclaiming him right away, and they've never let him go since. I do believe they think that he could get claimed in a waiver process if that ever happens. Now he's coming off that Achilles. He tweeted himself, I saw, that he thinks he's doing well. So we'll see what that amounts to, but I do think he has some good interior offensive line depth, especially in the second half of the season. So I really like Butker to start on PUP, come off that, and be a key member of the offensive line for me. And I don't think until you have someone that can replace Greg Manns, I don't know that you have a backup center, right? Like what are we thinking on the backup center front? That's where I have it right now until I see Cromer go a different
To
direction.
me, it's got to be rotational. To me, if something happens to Morse, Ryan Bates
Yep.
goes there,
Same.
right? And then it's who's subbing in at right guard. To me, that's what I think. But yeah,
I didn't love it when they did that with Feliciano, but it was the best option, and I
Right.
think it's in the same boat now. And same. So the front five are clear, and I actually honestly think our tackle setup is pretty cut and dry as well. It's Doyle and Quessenberry, and they're both functional. Tommy Doyle also sneaky high-end athlete
Yes.
and developmentally where he's at, so I'm excited to see how he continues along. But I love the Quessenberry signing as a sixth lineman, as a road grader to throw next to Spencer Brown.
Perfect.
And tell everybody, hey, good luck with that. The I don't know anything about Greg Mans. I played around a little bit watching him with Houston and a little bit with Miami, and he's fine. He's a functional interior depth piece, similar to honestly not terribly
Brian
dissimilar to where Winters was, or even Feliciano, where you really like him as a depth piece, but if he's your fifth best starter, it's probably not ideal. And that he's probably a slight notch below where Feliciano was, but that same ballpark. So that's an area that honestly, we've talked about the other sexier names at other positions. If Darrell Williams don't find a landing spot and he's still out there,
right.
that's the one piece that could really make me feel good about this offensive line room. If you just swap out Cody Ford and Greg Manson, throw in Darrell Williams, I'm good. I'm all the way good. And that, I got versatile pieces. I can move wherever. Any injury, I can find a combination that fits it. I'm good to go. So that's the one piece that's still out there that I'd be interested to see if he doesn't find the shot to start that he wants. If he's going to choose to be a backup anywhere, come back and be a backup here and help try to win a Super Bowl. So that's one name to watch out for that could change the math here. Otherwise, I agree. It's probably Greg Manson, Cody Ford until Ike Bacher is available. And then when Ike Bacher is available off PUP, it's all going to depend. Did Aaron Kromer reclaim some value from Cody Ford, or else he would be next on that list we mentioned earlier with Zach Moss as a potential cut-down day trade candidate to find a late-round pick later on of some GM that still had a good grade on him and wants to give it a shot.
Yeah, I think
one sleep on Luke Tenuta either, right? Like, I mean, maybe it's hey, come on, guys. Maybe that was a hand-picked Kromer pick.
You never know. I if anybody is there, go and take a look at Northwest Missouri State Tanner Owen. That dude is a freak. I am super excited to see what he does in camp. He is my favorite practice squad stash to develop and let him learn under Aaron Kromer, because that dude's a freak in nature.
Yep. And they like their UDFA lineman guys.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's crazy. They traded for one with Eli Harold, which is Rick Bates. I don't think it's crazy. They like one of those guys. You start with Tenuta, who was drafted, but all the way down to Owen,
Anderson,
Homer,
Kerstetter,
and Kerstetter, who was on draft boards.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not crazy that one of those can sneak on the roster, and especially if a Darrell Williams that kind of play isn't happened.
Yeah.
I just think that there is a spot there on the O line.
They would be the
best
fill-in
version.
As the ninth guy
For
who's
Butker.
inactive on game days. If Cody Ford was the cut down day trade, that would be the shift.
It's not crazy. UDFA contract, can develop him. Kromer handpicks his favorite rookie at that position group.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to think at a certain point with how much Ford has struggled. If you have Kromer come in, who is like the messiah of offensive line, if he can't make Ford work, I can't imagine they're going to get much for him in trade bait. I mean, the guy has proven he's not much in terms of whether it's a guard. I mean, he hasn't done much here at all. But needless to say, I like your Zach Moss thing. I think the two guys that I think is intriguing is Zach Moss and Epinesa, in terms of guys that are teetering on the roster as to whether or not they could be here or not. I think they're both trade bait.
Epinesa was my guy the whole time that Jerry Hughes was a free agent. Once he signed, now I'm like, it kind of lost, because like, if you trade AJ Epinesa and just resend Jerry Hughes, okay.
Right. Yep.
And they double dipped too. My backup to that was
they got both Hughes and Addison.
So Addison was okay in stretches. So that was my backup.
Hard pass. On Addison, hard pass.
Yeah, I'm excited to see a step forward. I like the idea that we only need one of Basham or Epinesa to take a step forward. Both do, it's great, but we just need one of them to take a step, and then Shaq's a functional guy, and then we're going to get more snaps out of Von Miller and Gregory Rousseau. So I feel like we're in pretty good shape there. But yeah, we need something.
Yeah.
But that's for next week's show.
Absolutely. Well, that's it. We got everybody. I had the same guys as you guys. I had Mance, Anderson, Ford, and Doyle. I'll be honest. As much as I'm excited about the offense, I think the defense is intriguing to see. All the different the battles that you're going to see. Linebacker is tight. I think defensive back could be really interesting. There's some good names in there. But again, I appreciate you guys. This has been a fun night. If you want to come back next Monday, I would love to have all three of you back, and we can finish this projection.
I will be in Florida with the family. It's Memorial Day next Monday, so if you push it to the week following, I don't know if you're going to do that. I don't know if you're going to do this on a holiday or not, but I'll be in Florida with my family on the beach.
That is, but you could always. Jealous. I mean, it's from the beach. Just have a cocktail and a camera.
Joe, what's that clinking noise?
Well, I had a cocktail for this show. First of all, second of all, I've been married for 21 years for a reason. I know my wife's boundaries.
Yeah, fair enough.
The occasion shows probably are the boundaries, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Frowned upon.
A little bit, especially in the off season. If there was a big game on Monday night, she'd probably be okay
different.
with it.
She knows what she's doing, but yeah.
But no, this is a lot of fun. We appreciate you having us on.
Absolutely. Guys, again, Joe Miller, Kevin Massar, Greg Tomset. Follow them on their socials at Joe Miller Wired, at Kevin Massar, and at Greg Tomset. Fantastic content they provide. Buffalo Rumblings, Cover One, Overreaction Podcast. Really, really good stuff. You're going to be seeing a lot more of them, and as the season ramps up, there's a lot more to go. I mean, we're drawing straws right now. It's a little bit of a dry season, which is weird for the NFL because there's almost no dry season anymore. But at least we're able to get something. Again, gentlemen, I appreciate you, and we will be back potentially the week after, and we can finish that, and we'll come up with some off the wall idea for next week. But again, guys, I appreciate you. This has been Buffalo Late Night. I am Thomas DeLoss. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
The Bills make me wanna shout. Kick your heels up and shout. Throw your hands up and shout. Throw your head back and shout. Come on now, the Bills are making it happen now. Stand up now, come on and shout. Yeah, 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 yeah. Say you will. Shout it right now, baby. Say you will. Come on, come on. Say you will. Come on and shout. Say you will. Yeah. Buffalo's happening now. We're on the move now. The Bills are happening now. They're making it happen now. You got the spirit, a lot of spirit, yeah. You got the spirit. Just watch it happen now. Hey, 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 hey. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. The Bills make me wanna. Hey, the Bills make me wanna. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. The Bills make me wanna. Buffalo's happy now. We're on the move now. Bills are happy now. The Bills make me wanna. Let's go Buffalo. A lot of spirit, yeah. Let's go Buffalo. The Bills make me wanna. The Bills make me wanna.
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.